Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene the third of five programs on the very complex and challenging domain of forgiveness in a time of duress, such as all of us find ourselves in our world today. I want to continue my reflections on some of the deeper aspects of forgiveness. And I want today to draw upon the work of Viktor Frankl in understanding some of the undergirding psychic infrastructure scaffolding that enables forgiveness to take place. Uh, at one level, forgiveness is an act of will. Others have said that forgiveness is an act of grace. It just comes from somewhere else and just opens our hearts. Viktor Frankl studied this matter very, very deeply and developed a whole body of psychiatric and psychological therapy called logotherapy. He was born in 1905 in Vienna. He was an Austrian Jew. He was extraordinarily brilliant, distinguished himself in the areas of psychology from a very early age. As a teenager, he had correspondence with Sigmund Freud and had written a number of papers in psychiatry and psychology. Freud even asked his permission to publish one of them. So impressed was the elder Freud by this very precocious young man. He rose to real recognition for his perspicacity of mind. And then the Second World War broke out. And in 1940, he was married to a beautiful young Jewish woman. And then 9 months later, the Nazis moved in, carted off the Frankel family, including his father and his wife, to a concentration camp. Viktor Frankl, over the next 4 years till he was liberated from Auschwitz, was in a number of camps. And if you've read Man's Search for Meaning, which was one of 39 books that he published, but was his magnum opus, he tells the story of how he was able to survive. And those of you who have read his work know that he got off the train in Auschwitz, having kept secret a manuscript that he was just finishing before he was taken into the concentration camps. And he says, I had no idea how I was going to keep it, but I knew this was the most precious thing in the world, and it was discovered and it was thrown away. But as a psychiatrist, he began to observe the inmates in the concentration camps and there at Auschwitz and realized that there was this pattern that he observed. That initially it was just complete shock at what was happening. That gave way to apathy and an inability to respond adequately to new traumas, that gave way to despair and eventually death. And one day, as he was in a work gang in the freezing cold, with just kind of pajamas on, no socks in his shoes, and it was freezing, and they were breaking up the ice, and the Gestapo were beating them and shooting some for dereliction of duty. Viktor Frankl all of a sudden had an experience of such deep love for his wife that he knew was in the women's section of the camp, that he was transformed because he was transported into another level of being. And he realized a very deep insight that by connecting, by delving into a deeper strata of consciousness and meaning, he was able, in that one epiphany of love, to fortify his energy and, more fundamentally, to strengthen his will to survive. And he pondered that. And he realized some very simple but profound truths that I would posit have a lot to do with our capacity to forgive. He realized, as he recorded it in Man's Search for Meaning, that when we cannot change the circumstances outside of ourselves, we are challenged to change our inner disposition in responding to those circumstances. And that when everything else has been stripped away, his father died, his wife died, everybody died. When everything is stripped away, there's the last of the human freedoms, he said. That freedom to determine how you are going to respond. And this, of course, was not new to Viktor Frankl. If you've read the ancient Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus of ancient Rome and Greece, now, this is what the Stoics said, that everything in our life is out of our control, except one thing. And that is that moral quality within all of us that orients our being to how we're going to respond. And if we understand that, as Viktor Frankl was to articulate it in his logotherapy, we undergird our experiences in a deeper level of meaning. And it's that discernment of a meaning matrix bigger than ourselves, bigger than even the situation in which we find ourselves, that enables us to forgive. And more deeply than forgiving, in his case, enables us to survive. Because physical energy, as he discovered, is one thing. You can be in a concentration camp and fed a crust of bread every other day. And if you can connect to love, if you can connect to empathy, you receive energy from the field that constitutes the cosmos itself. And in some mysterious way, I think there's a profound connection between what Viktor Frankl discovered in the freezing winter of Auschwitz and our capacity in our time to forgive. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Humanity Rising. It's always a delight to share time with you as we ponder these very deep, eternal complexities that have challenged the human soul for millennia, since ancient times, and now weigh upon us as if new. But by connecting to these ancient wisdoms, we are strengthened to overcome. I want to now introduce Tom Eddington, my good friend and colleague, who's convening this week on forgiveness. Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And as I seem to say every day, just thank you for your deep reflections and your thoughts that you bring into the conversation. And I especially appreciate your comments today as we talk about transmuting the hopelessness and pain that many people are feeling right now. And I love that you speak about the field. As many viewers have heard me say over multiple broadcasts, I function in the world with a profound knowing that the energy of the universe is love. It's available to all of us. We feed it and it feeds us. We can connect into it at any time. And I think it's appropriate, your comments, to lead into our conversation today on transmuting the pain and the sense of hopelessness that many are experiencing. And so I'm looking forward to a rich conversation with my good friend and colleague, Eileen Barker, and our panelists today. So welcome, Eileen. Really, just on a personal level, I'm needing this conversation. And so I'm really looking forward to our time together.
Oh, Tom, me too. I'm just so grateful to be here. So honored to be here with you and Jim, and I want to acknowledge of the people like Georg and Stan and Shannon and others who really make a lot of this happen behind the scenes. The after, it's incredible what's happening here, and I just am so grateful. I mean, Jim's bringing in Viktor Frankl and the teachings in such a full way and meaningful way, and guiding us right up to the doorstep of what we want to talk about today is the transmuting so that we can access the field of love and the soul energy. That's really what I think is so incredible about forgiveness. It is a portal to the field of love, which we all have access to all the time. And what forgiveness to me is that place where we don't, where we are afraid or angry or whatever isn't really showing up as love. It's the way to transmute it. So it was really a perfect opening. And then what you just shared, just building on that. So very, very grateful to be here and just building on the two very rich days we've already had. And I'm really looking forward to this one. So shall I bring in our guest today? Is this a good moment for that?
Yeah, I'll just jump in to say that one of the comments that Jim made, reminding us of Viktor Frankl and his insights, is that as we talked on Monday about, it's a process to get to forgiveness. There's anger, there's a sense of fight, flight, or freeze. There's the blame. There's all of the things that arise before we can get to the destination of forgiveness. And yet, in Victor's experience, he was somehow able to move right to that field of love and connection. And I really want to explore that today in our conversation. So yeah, please, when you're ready, bring Niki into our conversation.
All right. Well, I guess, Niki, I can't bring you in, but you can bring yourself in. There we go. So good to see you here.
Thank you.
So Niki Schmid is a very dear friend of mine, and we've been on my work is called the Path of Forgiveness. The website is thepathoforgiveness.com, etc. And Niki and I have been on the path of forgiveness together for many years. You said eight years earlier. I lost count. We knew each other before that, but on this path, and I actually love the way that this came to be. 8 years ago, I gave a talk to there was a sort of a leadership summit of an organization that Niki and I are both a part of, called the Human Awareness Institute, highglobal.org, and incredible work that they do, really had us showing up, and we were in this leadership, and they a meeting, and they asked me to give a talk, and I was talking about transforming conflict through forgiveness, because forgiveness is, I'm passionate about it, and it's also for me a tool because I'm a mediator. So how do we resolve conflict? So I gave this talk, and I have to say it was a really great talk. And afterward, I felt like, people liked it, but I wouldn't say it like blew them out of the room it was how I felt like, yeah. But it was okay. I mean, they really did like it, but it wasn't, yeah. So anyway, but then as we were going on a break, Niki rushed up to me and said, you just spoke right to my heart and soul. Right. And what I'll say is I find this is not the first time that I've given a talk, even to 150, 200 people, but there's one person that really gets it. That's how I met Marquita at Pepperdine. That's how I met Diane Sherwood in Kansas. They were the one out of the group that was kind of meant for them. And that day it was Niki. And she said, I can't tell you how much this means to me. And that meant so much to me, of course, too. And then I said something about, as we were talking about Ken Cloak and how much I had been inspired by him. And she said, well, I'm blown away. I'm signed up to go to his class next week. It was unbelievable. It was just such a beautiful coming together. And then just, I don't know, within the month, not very long after that, I was leading a retreat at Esalen. And I suppose we had one space open because Niki was able to join us for that. So that's Niki. She throws herself in. She listens to the call of her soul and her spirit, and this woman really lives from that place like no one I've ever met, truly. And she lives it and breathes it every day. So that's my introduction of Niki Schmid, other than to say Schmidt, she also is a native of Austria, Vienna, Austria. Well, you're in good company, a lot of fine people come from that place. And now she is a forgiveness mentor, and she's a Reiki healer, second generation Reiki healer, because her mother in Vienna is a Reiki, I think I'm saying that right, master. And she is very, very skillful in her work. When I need help, I go to Niki. And she's a brilliant, brilliant coach and mentor. And she works in her community, and you'll say more, I think, about that. But with communications with heart. Niki is a very, very heartful person, and helps us integrate the wisdom and the heart. So we're gonna be jumping into that today, to look at this transmutation. Niki, do you want to say? Well, I thought, and I'm not sure of the order here, but of doing a little presencing breath meditation today. Or would you like to begin and then do it?
I just want to put my voice in so that before we go into the breath, and that, everyone at least has heard my voice, and just off the bat want to say thank you, Eileen, thank you, Tom, thank you, Jim, thank you, Stan, thank you, Humanity Rising and Ubiquity University. And for me I feel so honored to be here today. I bring so much gratitude. And the serendipitous note that Victor and I, both from Vienna, those are the little messages where I go like, thank you, life. That's the right path. That's where I go. And like what you were just sharing, our serendipitous meeting and Ken and all of it. So coming together in that, the field showing me where to go. I don't think 8 years ago I had that awareness yet. And yes, today I know that when Jim brings in Viktor Frankl, that he's here right now. We're connected to that spirit, to that soul. So now I call it my goal path meets the soul path. And so thank you for bringing that so beautifully in today. So that's all I want to say right now. And I think I can use a breath, and then I'll share more after.
All right. This is often how we begin our work because, our head can do just fine and listening and engaging, but we want to make sure that, our bodies are present and that we're actually here in this moment in present time. And so for me, as all my students know, I always say breath is number one. It's our number one tool. So if you are comfortable doing so, I invite you to close your eyes for this. And it's going to be a short, but hopefully effective guided meditation. So close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so and find your breath. Taking the moment to find your breath. Powerful, powerful way that just in that simple act we can affirm, I'm here. I'm alive. Life is breath, and breath is life. So let's not pass over the miracle of our breath and our life, and the fact that we are here in this moment. And if there are thoughts and whatever might be pulling on your attention, whether it's pulling you into the past or into the future, anything other than right here, right now, I invite you to gently set all of that aside just for these few moments so that you can feel yourself, your breath. Give yourself that precious, precious gift. Breathing into your heart, feeling your heart. The longest journey we take in life is the journey from our head to our heart. So allowing the mind to relax and trust that it's safe to feel your heart and connect with your heart and shift your focus to your heart. And what I always say as we do this meditation is that, whenever we invite stillness and presence and heart, anything that's not that is going to show up, probably very loudly, because there's parts of us that want attention. They don't want to be ignored. They won't be ignored. And that's so valuable because in that moment you can see so clearly what your work is. Because it's never to ignore anything like that. We never ignore our messengers that are screaming at us. They need something. So we're always going to honor them. And then breathing again into the heart. And sometimes it's helpful to put one hand on the heart and one hand on the lower abdomen and breathe into the abdomen. Let your energy drop into that part of your body as much as you possibly can, because this is, the gut is super sensitive. super sensitive to any kinds of feelings, reactions that you might not be aware of in your mind, but the gut's picking up on all the time, especially around whether it feels safe or not for you to be in your body right now. So again, just noticing, and if possible, breathing into the gut, to the lower abdomen, and dropping in there. And from there, letting your awareness come all the way down your legs to your feet. And then in whatever way is comfortable for you, acknowledging your connection or feeling your connection to the earth, to the planet. Grounding. Deep into the earth. Deep into the earth's core. And once you feel that, then simply find a place in your body, could be anywhere. I always say from the neck down, that feels relatively peaceful for you. Relatively calm. And just bring your attention to that place. Breathe into it. And then when you're ready, can bring yourself back into your room and into the Zoom room. Thank you for going there with me. It feels very good to know that we are all connected, those that we see and those that we don't see in this way. And that's a part of the field. We're all part of the field. So with that, Niki, I want to introduce you again and ask for you to bring yourself in and share with us what your life has been like. Mostly, I'm talking about, of course, the last 3 weeks, and I mentioned yesterday that you lost your home 3 weeks ago in Topanga Canyon. And I know that it's been a probably just incredible, not necessarily all positive, but just very, very powerful 3 weeks for you. So I'd love to have you share that and how you are coming to us today.
Thank you. Yes, exactly 3 weeks ago, last night, we evacuated at 7. The home was gone at 11. So to say it was a very fast uprooting, it's probably an understatement. What I will jump, excuse me, what I will jump right into, which is the reason for this call, is that breath was what kept me somewhat present to gather at least a few things, pack up 2 cars and pack up essentials. It was kind of strange what I packed up. I will say that on the side note, and some things I wonder why, and some things I left. Nevertheless, breath, and having learned that over and over again is what gets me to not lose myself, was what has kept me through this 3 weeks as well. Whenever I notice that I want to go into the panic mode, or I want to disconnect from myself, or it takes a moment, it's not immediate, and there's signs that I can feel in my body now, as you were just saying, that are always the places where I start to tense up first, which is for me my upper legs, and then I know, oh, okay, I am starting to go somewhere where I would not be cohesive and coherent with myself anymore. So then I remember I have to breathe. And that's a muscle. That's not something that's come like this. And I'm continuing to do so. So that was the first thing. And again, thanks through this work and through the work from Human Awareness Institute to learn about emotional intelligence, to reading an enormous amount of books around all these subjects, to learning forgiveness with you, to guiding people through forgiveness these last 5 years, seeing their change in life and the gifts that they got out of it, which they would never believe in the beginning. I always say, if I would have told you that you would reconcile with your sister or your mother or and spend Christmas with them, you would have said in July, there's just no way. And so having received those gifts myself, as I do my process over and over and over again, as our dear friend Marquita says, forgiveness is a lifestyle. And like you said this morning or at some point, Tom, it's a process. It's not an instant injection. It can be if we practice enough. I think Viktor Frankl had insight practice enough to give it an injection, yet it's still a process. And my word for 2020 thrive was excitement. Little did I know what I was getting into. And I had the excitement in mind of the childlike awe. They're like, what's in this package? What's around the corner? And I'm still there. And I had a bit of other excitement as well. And what I will say is as I was leaving and we're evacuating to a friend, my partner, my dog, and I already knew on the drive to her space that even though this is happening to us, to all of LA, and I'm only speaking for myself, this is my story. There's thousands of stories out there. And this is only mine. Yet I knew actually the moment when I left, I thought I was actually going to come back. The moment I got out of the car at a different space of the property and got almost blown over by 120-mile winds, I knew I wasn't coming back. And I was white knuckling my steering wheel to drive on a mountain ridge. But as I was white knuckling it, I kept telling myself, this is happening to me and it is happening for me because it's happening through me. And the through is the part that I've learned over these last 8 years through all of what I just mentioned. Because I used to be very quick in forgiving, actually. I think it was something that I was born with. Yet I would go very quick. I wouldn't do the through. I would forgive very quickly. And through my divorce and my separation, actually, I realized I forgive the other much faster than I forgive myself. And then I realized, oh, there's also me. I have part of what got created. So I have to forgive myself for not speaking up or for doing something that I didn't want to do and never apologizing or all that. And so I had to incorporate myself. But through that, I learned that it's the way through from the 2 to the 4. And I was so grateful already then for the past, for the present, and for the future. It's not an easy ride, believe me. I'm not always as composed as this. And I'm going through it and I'm allowing it when it happens. And then I bring in the breath. Just the other day, I heard that one of my favorite trees survived. And when I heard that from my son, when he said, your mama tree is alive, I burst into tears in front of friends and forgot to breathe and coughed. And they were like, are you okay? Are you okay? And I said, yes. And okay, I need to breathe. I need to breathe. This is the moment of grief. This is the moment through. This is the morning. And then in comes the joy and the gratitude and for what was and what will be. And Tom, we spoke about that yesterday too. It's like grief and and joy are right next to each other. And that's the work of forgiveness in the end, is that's the process of that teeter-totter, however long it takes, and however it shows up. So that is where I'm currently. And yes, also I will say our town has survived because of community. We could have very well been another Palisades in Altadena that got absolutely decimated. And this community that I've lived here for 17 years in the same house, raised my 2 adult sons. Well, then they were children, now they're adults, but has made it so that we have a town to come back to, that we have a community to come back to. And I knew I needed to rest for 2 weeks, even though I was compelled to go and help, because I needed to recharge myself. So when I come back now, that I can be of help with the tools that I have. From forgiveness to Reiki to communication to being with each other, not even doing, but being with each other, because that's what we are. We're human beings, not human doings. So this is what I bring today. I have some ideas and shares, and it's really it's the emotional part. It's the allies in the emotion. You were just talking about the messengers, that making friends with the feelings that come up in the through part, rather than pushing them away or dwelling in them. I mean, we all probably have done both. And I see them now as friends. They want to come and tell me something. I always say they can come in for 3 cups of tea, and after 3 cups of tea, they have to leave. They can come back again, but I got to take a break. So, and I have conversations with them, because really what that conversation is my inner child, my wise one, like you've all mentioned already, that has messages for me. And if I don't pause, if I don't breathe, if I don't center in that heart of what is it that you want to tell me right now, and put blanket of compassion over it that wasn't there when I needed it in the very first incident of this moment, then they're going to rebel, and they're either going to knock on the door like Wilma, like Fred, and let me in, or they're just going to run away. So that is what I've learned through this process. And through this, I think next to my separation and divorce, this is really the hardest thing I've ever done.
Beautiful.
And I don't know when my emotions will come up. So you have to ride with me on this roller coaster today, because that's what it's all about.
And your emotions are beautiful and welcome always.
Yeah. And that's, I think, I will just say, I think that's the crux of our humanity. It's like we don't learn it at school. Parents don't get the tools to do. I mean, more and more I see now young families. My son is a teacher at the school that he went to, actually, and I'm friends with many of the young mothers, and it's beautiful to see how it is done differently. I want to say I hope I already did it a bit different with my sons, and particularly once learning it through the Human Awareness Institute, they were teenagers. I got much more aware of like what it is to be emotionally intelligent and in communication and in consent with each other around conversations and dialogue and all of that. And it's beautiful to see that. And we still don't have that. And that's what sets us apart from the rest. I mean, not that animals don't, and plants and rocks have emotions and feelings. They are energy emotion just like we are, but they can't verbalize it to each other. They shake it off. I mean, my dog just does this, and I'm like, okay, I'm at a new place. Okay, you're here. That's all good. I'm fine. But we don't do that. So, but that sets us apart as humanity. And I think that's our way through to the field, is the emotion, and sharing that vulnerably, which is really our strength and makes us human and accessible. As someone told me in a very vulnerable moment where I felt very weak, and she looked me deep in the eye and she said, honey, don't you ever mistake vulnerability with weakness again. It's the strength that makes you human and accessible. And I really took that to heart 12 years ago, and I can't deny it anymore. So when someone asks me, how are you today? And it's the cashier at Trader Joe's and says, you going home after this? And it's 3 days after or a week after the burn. And I have this moment of like, well, I can either make shit up and tell him something fake, or I can tell him and say, no, I'm going to my friends, which I'm very blessed, but my home burned a week ago. And we had a beautiful conversation at the Trader Joe's checkout. So choosing that moment by moment by moment.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Niki. So much wisdom that's coming through you and your lived experience. It's just so beautiful to hear. And I want to bear witness that I spoke to Niki the next morning. So it was, I guess, 3 weeks ago exactly, because this is Wednesday morning too. And it was Wednesday morning, and you were already right there. You told me, I know there's going to be many gifts. I know I'm going to be okay. You didn't really skip a beat. You went right to your trust, your faith, your practices, and such a beautiful example, because that's what I think the our goal should be. We have the tools, we have the books. I remember sometime not long ago, about 5, I looked at my books and I said, any one of these books would sort of take me home, as Ram Dass would say. They all have, so I don't need any more book. I have all of that. Everything is shown here, but then it's like, okay, but now applying it, and the test is when it's really in that hardest moment where, okay, it's like a life-defining crossroads. And the beauty of it is if you don't get it, you get another chance. We get infinite chances to do it, to make that choice. But you're just such a beautiful role model for all of us, that it is possible, as Viktor Frankl said, even in the hardest situations, we can choose our response.
Yeah.
And I think I want to make this point that when I talk about forgiveness, and as you said, it is a process. And I guess how I think of it, and the process that I put together, which I wanted to share with people, it's contained in this book called The Forgiveness Workbook. And that's a picture of a beautiful mountain in my area called Mount Tamalpais, where I had a real big forgiveness experience many years ago. But it is a process, and you start where you are. It's not like, well, I have to get to where I can forgive before I start the process. No, the process starts where you are. So in that way, and then sort of, and this one has 12 steps laid out, and we're going to talk about some of them. Now I'd like to do that, but it's a journey to get to where you are ready to forgive. And what we move through is what is showing up. That's like what I said in the meditation. If I'm asking you to find that place, where you're peaceful and you've got your anger screaming at you, great. Just track that, notice that. And then that's where the work begins. So it could be grief. It could be fear. It could be confusion, any number. But wherever it is, then that's where we begin. So
I always say, I myself and invite my mentees is it's an archaeological digging of our own feelings, right?
Yeah.
And we find the little bones and what's underneath that, because usually in the grief there's something different, on the anger there's something different, which more than often is actually addressed at us, that we didn't do something or that we did do something. And so it can go over into being angry at the other person, but most of the time it's actually really a mirror to ourselves, what we don't like. And to confess that to ourselves, that's the piece that also Ken spoke so eloquently to yesterday, is like taking that responsibility that we do have a part in it. We do have. And in this incident, I will just say, I was thinking, is like, well, there's really nothing to forgive, because the fire was the fire, right? And I could very well quickly fall into a victim place, which is a place of that dignity taken, right? Or the firefighters didn't do what they needed to do, or our landlords didn't, or whatever, and get angry at that. And there is, believe me, I mean, there is those moments where it's like, oh, I just want to reverse it all, right? And I didn't want to be a fire victim. I don't, and I know that, and I really want to say this to the group, and there's a lot of tragical stories out there. And yes, there are victims. And I do pray and hope and ask the field that one day they can transmute it into something different as well. But that's where they are right now. And so that's why I'm saying I was so grateful for already having the process and the single tools. I didn't use them all, just one day, oh yeah, I have that. Oh yeah, I can breathe. Oh yeah, I can, what's that feeling? That taking bits and pieces from it. And not go through the 12 steps all at once again, but maybe I will have to. And so at one point, it's the bits and pieces that we train with a muscle, and it's just like playing a piano piece. You then know the notes, and sometimes you'll miss it, and you'll mess up, and you'll start again. And so that's the same thing. It's a process and a continuation of going to build that muscle.
Exactly. Beautifully said, Niki. Thank you. So where we begin the process, I want to speak to this for a moment. It's been sort of alluded to, but I want to address it head on. We look at the grievance story. That's where we start. We look at the story. What happened? What is the grievance? Because so often we have, a grievance, but what we don't realize is that we've created a story. So it's really powerful. This is the part of the process. It's really it's the cognitive piece. It's the part that helps us loosen up the story that we're telling, in which we're a victim, in which we have created ourselves a victim, whether it's of the fire or whatever it is, the relationship, the politics, the cancer, anything. How am I feeling powerless? How have I made a story where I'm the victim? And that's the first piece that's really important to look at, because how have I given up my power? Forgiveness is a lot of it is taking back your power from places where you have felt powerless. For me, this has been huge so many times when I feel utterly powerless. I look at situation and I really believe I'm utterly powerless, but I'm not. That's the thing, but we're not. So, but before we see that, we really feel that we are. And I love how you sort of dodged a bullet there, Niki, because you already had the tools. And so that's really brilliant. So that's the first thing we're looking for in the story. The second thing, well, the very first thing is just even realizing we have a story, because we often just don't even see that we have made a story. And the difference is that a story is selective. In the story, we don't tell everything that happened. We select certain parts of it that build our narrative. And human beings are storytellers. I mean, we know that children love stories, and we know that, going all the way back to people sitting around fires and living in caves, they're storytellers. That's, the way we share and build community, but sometimes the stories that we're telling hold us back and don't give us access to all of who we are. That's why it's so important. So in our story, it's interesting, and I learned this from Fred Luskin. Universally, there's always a good guy and a bad guy. And we're always the good guy in our story. I mean, it's so obvious that once you see it, but we're always the good guy. We're always innocent, and it's true, we are innocent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we see, our innocence and our goodness, and then the other one is bad. And that's another way of giving up our power. But so that's interesting. But then the other next thing we look for is blame. And I think Fred Luskin and Ken Cloak both gave us such beautiful, brilliant reflections about blame. What Ken said yesterday, what I remember, I'm sure he said more than this, was that when we don't know how to resolve a problem, then we blame, then we find someone to blame. If we knew how to fix it, we would. That also goes to the powerlessness. If we knew how to resolve it, we would, but we don't know how. So we feel powerless. Doesn't mean we are. It means we just don't yet know, but then we blame. So that's really interesting. We find someone to blame. So we need to look at who do we blame? What do we blame them for? And what Fred said, which was also really interesting, I wrote this down, is that blame, and I would say victimization too, probably destabilizes our nervous system. It creates health issues and it feeds powerlessness. It's not good for long-term problem-solving thinking. Blame, and of course anger hijacks us, hijacks the nervous system, the neocortex there. When we're really in anger, they call it emotional flooding. We literally, it cuts off blood from the brain. We can't think clearly.
I will say though, and particularly right now too, it is an important part of the grief process.
Yes.
And I just saw someone who said, I just linked together grievance equals grief. Yes, that's exactly it. And grief isn't only of the loss of a person, it's really of the loss of something that we wanted to have or that we couldn't get. And the anger part is so important. Like I said earlier, it's like not to hang out there. And also, I think Fred and both Ken said to it, be there for a moment. No, if you're angry, that's an alert sign, alert, alert, alert. I'm angry. What am I angry about? And that is a gateway actually to the feeling. So it's a really important part.
What am I angry about? And what do I need? Anger is a flashing
Well, that's
light.
the whole formula. Yes.
That need, something very important. Something very important is not being met. So what is the need? So that's the work with the story. That's to help us see that, oh, the way I'm seeing it isn't the only way to see it. That's important. That there could be another story. I don't yet know what it is, but I'm willing to look at it differently. I'm willing to take back my power. Most of us welcome that. I see that blame is a dead end, so let me stop doing that because it is. And then we also look at another piece about how we're taking this personally, where it's taking us. But I think what I'd like to move into now, the next big piece is the emotional work. And Niki, maybe you would like to address how from the story we go into that piece.
Sure, yeah, happy to. There was just something you said, and I was the anger. Well, it slipped, so I'll let it go.
Yeah.
Well,
And Niki, if I can just jump in.
yes, please.
So I lived in the Bay Area for 16 years. I had a backpack with my to-go stuff. Copies of any important documents. In my car, I had, water supply, food supply, etc. in the event of a wildfire, in the event of a earthquake. And so I was constantly reminded that everything that I was, everything that I owned, everything that was in my home could disappear in a moment. And so back to the story, there was a relationship I had with all of my stuff that it could be gone. When I was living in New Mexico, there was a fire that started at the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains near Santa Fe, and it was marching up the eastern side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Ultimately, it consumed 500,000 acres, and it was traveling, as much as 10 miles an hour, moving towards my home, and I could see this huge plume. And so this happened over the span of about 10 days, and I could see it getting closer and closer to my home, and I could prepare what was the stuff that I was really attached to? What was the stuff that I couldn't imagine parting? And so, in this conversation, I was creating stories, both in terms of what if suddenly with an earthquake, everything is gone, or if this fire does get to my home, what's important to me? And so as we go into this work more, I'd like to make a distinction between something that's happening because of Mother Nature and what's happening because of the actions of another human being. Particularly when the human being intentionally knows what they are doing may cause harm, but it's their story that they believe they're doing things for whatever reason, either for personal benefit, personal gain, or because they're their story. And so if we can make the distinction between those two, it would be really helpful.
Absolutely. And this isn't, I didn't come to, when I said I would talk today, I had a home. I didn't go through what I'm going through. So it's not about the experience of the last 3 weeks. As I just also said, it's actually, there isn't anyone to blame, right? Even though I could, but hard to do that with Mother Nature. And yes, it could be however the fire was set up and all of the stories that are out there. But really, this is a process that can be applied to any of it. So hopefully what I will share now also will help you with that. And I know much of it already. It's how do we apply it and are willing to apply it and go through that literal burn, actually, which is quite serendipitous in this case. But yes, so, and thanks for that point, Tom. So for me, having worked with Eileen's process, I always kind of felt like forgiveness I was brought in with that. That was sort of my role in my family, kind of see everyone's perspective, realize they have their story, they just don't match up and they miss each other all the time. And I could sense what it was. And then I actually put forgiveness a bit to the side for a few decades and made it naive and gullible. And I didn't even have the word forgiveness, but for me, it was like loving and accepting what is. And I love Byron Katie's work. For those who don't know it, it's fantastic because it really gets you down to the nugget of like accepting what is. And that often is easier to accept what is, but what isn't, what we don't, that's really hard. And for me, acceptance, through the Human Awareness Institute, once again, I learned that there's many levels of love, and acceptance is the first level of love. So if I can accept what is and what isn't, I am in the field of love. It's not easy, and I'm not liking it. Love does not equal like for me. I will love, but I may absolutely not like it. If I want to be in the field of love, I got to accept. And the hardest things have to be acceptable. And so Byron Katie just brings it down to the nugget. But that's what, the beginning of that was for me. It's like I always was loving. So I put that aside. I learned it with the Human Awareness Institute to go like, oh, this is actually true to me. This is who I am as a human being. And to learn the hardest things to accept that I didn't want to accept, which is what you spoke to, Tom. How can you accept someone who harms you or that doesn't, want the things that you want, and goes different ways and alters life and all of that. So then to sit with the acceptance and the love, which is the gateway to the feeling, because in that acceptance, most of the times, or what we don't want to accept, that is the formula for me within Eileen's process is how I come to this throughway is there's something in my dignity that's being taken from me. That's a crack. That's a violation. There's, again, different stages of that. There may be just little pieces of dignity cracks, or there may be a huge dignity violation that's happening. But the little pieces also add up and are not to be pushed aside at all. And for those who, are interested, there's a fantastic book out there by Dr. Donna Hicks, who traveled around the world in conflict resolution and realized that each conflict actually comes from the same dignity violation, crack, however you want to call it, and that it's universal and that it's a birthright. Dignity does not equal respect. Dignity is a birthright of who we are as a human being. Respect is what we do and that we earn or give. But dignity is something that all around the globe, no matter where and how you were born, is your birthright. So when something cracks in that dignity, like in this, it was just like, it could fall into a fire victim, or my safety was taken, or I don't feel accepted. She has 10 essential points that I'm sure that there's many more, but she made 10 essential points what our dignities are and how we take ourselves out or take someone else out of the dignity. Eileen?
Yeah, just what I want to just drive home this point, that a very, very core piece of dignity is I'm perfect as I am. I have the right to be who I am. And the dignity violation that I think is happening for many people is it's like a denial of who they are. That's a very, very big dignity violation, that who you don't even exist. You don't, that's
You don't
not a,
belong. It's a
you don't
you do
belong,
not belong. Yes.
you don't,
Our
yeah.
belonging is taking. Yes.
So I think that is huge. And you don't have a place here, and you're not accepted. You're not acceptable by
Yes.
society for whatever. And there are many groups and different reasons for each, but it goes to the heart. That is a huge dignity violation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll very quickly, just so that it makes sense also in the talk, is like here just the 10 without going too much into detail. But the first one is acceptance. Then it is recognition for who we are in our experience and talents, and acknowledgement for what we are bringing and that people are listening to us. Inclusion, belonging, safety, physical and emotional safety, fairness, independence, that we feel we are in control and not being controlled or controlling something. There's a very big difference for me. There's a lot of control talk, but when I'm in control, that's all right. If I'm controlling something or someone controls me, my dignity is shaking. Being understood. Doesn't matter that we agree, but we want to know that we matter with what we bring. Benefit of the doubt, that we're trustworthy and that we are coming with good intentions, whatever our story is. Benefit of the doubt, that we come with good motives, and accountability, that we take responsibility for our actions. That's when we're in dignity. And then there's 10 temptations of saving face, taking the bait, avoiding conflict, false intimacy, gossiping. So those take us out of our dignity. So when we're not in our dignity, what Eileen was speaking to as well is this is sort of the formula I found for myself. It's like there's a dignity crack. In that dignity crack, there's a need that is not met, something that I need. And again, this often goes back to our childhood, which is also what Eileen's process leads through then at some point, right? It started somewhere and it keeps on showing up in our life over and over again in different people, in different versions. I like to call it lovingly an AFGO, which a friend of mine gave me that acronym, which is another effing growth opportunity. And now I say it's another forgiving growth opportunity, So an AFGO just shows up. They usually get bigger and bigger and more intense. Our health gets compromised, whatever it is. And when we get to that moment of our dignity crack and we go like, what is it that I need right now? Often we don't even know. But again, that's a muscle that we need to learn. Is like, what do I need right now? Often we put the need of what we need onto someone else. They need this, so surely they must need this. We don't actually know what we need. So then it's that, okay, I need quiet right now. I need to walk away. I'm not abandoning you. I just need to walk away. That's what I need right now. It's got nothing to do with you. I need this. And then in that need, there's a feeling that we put into place and make it personal for ourselves, that this must mean surely this, and takes our worthiness. And then we make a story about ourselves that we're not worthy about something. And then we push those feelings away, or we dwell in them, whichever we choose to, or both. And that's where the through part happens for me. That's where the soul path meets the goal path for me. That's where I have my tea conversations. That's where I go like this either very personal or global and collective issue problem that's being brought to me, that AFGO. What does it mean for me personally? And when I can go into that and take care of myself, voice my needs, often it's just even saying what I need. Often it can actually be help. They can feed my need. It's not to their fault. It maybe was in the very beginning that there wasn't someone there. But again, it's a story that has evolved, like Eileen said. And then I can take care of my own need or not. I have voiced it, can take care of my own feelings. I can go through the process. And then what happens for me, and that is the miraculous for me, what I actually wanted to begin with often shows up, or I get the gifts, or something comes when I allow that vulnerability of the feeling then to express. The things that then happen, I couldn't have even made up because they would have been too good to even ask of. And something shows up and works itself out rather than me thinking I have to do something about it. So for me, then it goes back to be with my dignity crack, be with my needs, be with my feelings, let that emotion, that energy run, and then sit in the space of the field. I'm more than often await now for the miracles. Not because I demand them and not because I feel like I'm worthy of it. No, it's because it wants to come and say, let me just come, but you got to get out of your own way. So I hope, Tom, that is sort of a quick recipe for the formula that I have that I then apply to Eileen's amazing process, because I always say that I love when someone throws me the ball, I'll run with it. If I think it's good, I'll run with it. And I love Eileen's process. And then it's the personal process that gets made by each person, and it's always different. But her process is such a great skeleton. It's a recipe. And then you just throw in your own, little spices and things, or take something out that doesn't, which although there really isn't anything to take out, but only to add in. So, but that's where I then, excuse me, my dog has a cough, in case you heard that. So that's where I find that's where my spiritual path then comes. That's where my soul finally says, oh, you've heard me. And it often comes through the body, because we don't like to listen to the soul, but we do listen to the body at some point. And so they go really also hand in hand. And so when the crack gets too big, when it breaks, when the light wants to come in, that's when anger or blame, and I go like, oh, there you go. Okay, there's a story in here that I can make. Oh, this is what I was going to say earlier. It's like, I think what for me happens is the powerless isn't even so much out there. When I feel powerless, I don't feel creative. I don't feel like there's juice running or anything. So then from the story that happened to me where I feel powerless to happens for me, that's when the creativity starts. And most of the time in a way that I wouldn't have thought. And so I once heard this beautiful analysis of an artist. This is like, you learn the techniques, the tools, you do all of that, but when you actually get the blank canvas or the sculpture to sculpt, you throw the techniques out. You maybe not even use all the tools. You just be with the piece. And that's what forgiveness is. It's a piece of art. You have the tools, you do it, and then I'm not using them all right now, by all means, but I'm using some, and I already can feel something is being created. And I don't know what it is yet, and that's okay too.
That's so good, Niki. Thank you. Such a beautiful encapsulation.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think that what you're really pointing us to is, and it's so important, is that we don't know.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the most humbling and vulnerable thing that we can really embrace, is that we do not know the big picture. And that's Byron Katie's, I think, wisdom too. We don't know. So we can say, well, someone shouldn't do this, and this is horrible, and this is, and all of that. But we don't know. And when we there is a part of us, though, that soul piece that you're talking about so beautifully, that is connected to the everything.
Mhm.
And that if we can open to it, we're not in control. But if we open to it, what's so beautiful is that our needs will get met, usually often in ways
Mhm.
beyond our fathoming. And if we can trust that and open to it, and it's a big surrender.
Mhm. Yes.
But it does open us to a beautiful, beautiful life path of really opening, as Colin Tipping used to say, he's the teacher of radical forgiveness, and he would say, open to the miracles. The miracles when we just don't stop
Mhm.
trying to figure everything out intellectually and mentally, and instead really just, okay, what is going on here? Maybe there's something bigger. For an example, I'm just going to give one example that is very relevant right now with this sort of dismantling of our government, which is very alarming to a lot of people and shocking and so forth. But I don't know. Maybe something better will arise. Maybe the phoenix will come. I mean, I've been saying all my life, and I've spent almost 10 years in Washington. It's a big broken machine. It really is. And so while I don't like maybe the directions that certain people will want to take it, the dismantling of it could be good. I don't know, but I don't need to, I don't really need to lose sleep over it, because it's out of my control. It's out of my power. And I'm trusting right now there. I'm open, a curiosity there. Well, oh, that's interesting. It's different than feeling angry about it or victimized by it. But what I really love, and I just want to even amplify a little more, is that the through
Mhm.
that you talked about. So going through is the feelings that we can't go. It's like going through the eye of the needle. They said camel. You can't go through. The camel can't go through. You have to. But the energy of emotion, it's energetic, really. The release. It's the sobbing. It's the shaking, and however the letting those feelings have voice, and then they take us to what's underneath them. As Niki said, often there are patterns that take us back into our childhood. So at that point, we have the opportunity to heal very, very deeply, wounding that happened to us long ago when we did not have tools and we didn't know, but now we do. And so we're able to bring our higher self and our wisdom to bear to help heal that little one. That's the core work that we do, Niki and I, in coaching people, mentoring people, and also in our retreats. And I'll just mention, because I haven't yet, that we are offering one in April in Northern California. And so those are deep opportunities to do this work. And then out of that healing, we are reconnected with who we really are. So our dignity is restored.
Yes.
Who we are, that we are valuable, we are exactly as we are. And that is just so incredible to receive that. And this is the interesting thing. Nobody else can give that to you, and nobody can take it away.
Mhm.
You can only let yourself go there and receive it. You're in charge of opening to receive the gift. And then you receive, if you open and you want that, you will receive it, and nobody can take it away. And so you have your dignity, your wholeness. You are just as important as anybody else, just as special as anybody else. Just perfect exactly as you are. And that is the transformative moment where you then get to step into your life and in your whole self, for most of us, in a way we've never experienced before, that wholeness, who we really are. And as you said so beautifully, Niki, that's where all that magic and the gifts and beyond our wildest dreams, I'm constantly blown away too. Constantly. I worked with a woman for a long time. She was totally estranged from her whole family. It was so painful. And she did all of the work and all of the grief and all of the forgiveness. And this was many years ago. And just in the last year, I've reconnected with her. Her mother has now moved to her town. Her sister and mother now live very close to her. They're all connected. They all together. They're all supporting each other. I said, "What? What?" She, referenced that she's perhaps spending the holiday. What? Is this the same mother, the same sister? And so things like that, and that are just so miraculous. And that's the personal level. And I think it's important to do the personal work that is ours to do. And then, well, you might say, what about this bigger piece about what's happening on the world stage? And I'll just say, I think there's a lot of important forgiveness work to do there and create the miracles. We don't know what's possible yet because we haven't done it. But there's somebody that's working with me now who's taken on the work of forgiveness on a global planetary level. That to begin that process. And it's so important that once we heal do our own work, we can then, and I think we need to do it collectively, heal the wounds of racism, heal the wounds of destruction to indigenous populations and all that's been taken, heal the wounds to the planet, the wounds of the patriarchy, all of that. And I think it's exciting and it's big. And I remember reading a wonderful book by an organizational development person. I can't think of his name, but Tom, you'll probably know exactly what I mean. He talked about the importance of cathedral thinking because he said you can't build a cathedral. Cathedrals aren't built in one person's lifetime. So the architect who designs it, he won't be alive when it's completed. And then they'll be built, it's generational, but we can be the architects. We are. I think that is
I like that.
the gift of our generation, those of us who are here at this time. And I have to channel Marquita, who I'd love to be here, but isn't able to, Marquita Campbell, who was here at Humanity Rising in September. And she says, we're ready. This is our moment. We're ready for such a time as this. For such a time as this is why we've done all this work, why we've been developed, why we've been given all these tools for such a time as this.
Yeah.
I'd like to explore a bit more. I get the personal, and I can get the relational. Where I'm finding myself stuck is, I don't know, and I know only time will let us know. With the actions being taken by the administration right now. We'll know. Yes, I think most people agree that so much of what the federal government does is broken and it needs repair. We've got an administration who stepped in to say their plan is to destroy, to tear down, as opposed to build. And I get all of that. Where I get stuck is in my relational piece or my relationships, people who are cheering that action on, that behavior on, knowing that very likely people around the world are dependent upon US aid are going to die. Likely people who are in some of the targeted populations may take their own life or may get killed in the process. And I haven't been able to get to the space that you two are speaking to yet. And I'm wondering, how do I, or any of our viewers and listeners, how do we reconcile that piece of it? The relational piece of folks who have lost their sense of humanity, lost their sense of heart, and cheering on actions that very likely will result in death, that will result in just horrible suffering. And how do I reconcile that? How do I make peace with that? How do I restore those relationships? How do I transmute that?
Right.
I love your question, really, Tom. It's everything that you've just said. And three things come to me, and then I want to hear what Niki says. One is that we don't know, like you said. And I think that's really important. We don't know what's going to happen. And so projecting worst case scenarios, I'm not saying to be not, I'll come back to that, but just to recognize that there is some of that going on. Speculation, projecting into the future, the worst case. So that isn't, that we have a choice about, again, where we put our attention and intention. So we can make some choices there. Is that where we want to focus? I think that it's important. Like, I want to know that, yes, it's possible. These things can happen, and I want to do everything I can about that because I care, but not to dwell there. I wouldn't want to dwell there because I don't want to create that. I don't want to create that. I want to put my intention when I want to create. Secondly, and Jim said it so beautifully the other day, Jesus Christ on the cross. They know not. And maybe we know not. We don't know. They don't know. They're doing the best they can from where this is what it looks like to them. And the people I know who voted for Donald Trump, I'm sure don't want any of that. That's not what they were choosing. But there are some good things for them that made sense for them, of what they were choosing. They weren't choosing death and suffering, I don't think. Not the ones I know anyway, when they're cheering him on. And that isn't what they're cheering for. He represents something else for them that they're cheering for, that I'm working hard to try to see myself. And I think I see part of it is what is dismantling, this dismantling that isn't the way I would do it or prefer to do it. And it is going to be hard for a lot of people, but maybe there's some good to come out of it. We don't know. And then the other thing is that, for example, somebody who would take their life, I just feel an urgent desire to want to give them these tools. It's that so they don't give up their power, so that they reclaim their dignity. And that's so important. That's such a poignant example of why this is so needed, this type of realization. And I know that it's very hard. Sometimes people are in a place they just can't hear it. And I have, my stepson is non-binary. So I know this is really hard. Basically, on paper, he doesn't exist. They don't exist. He's okay. He's flexible on pronouns, but I feel I know you're really good at it, Tom. I'm not so good at remembering they. And sometimes they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to be fixed. They don't want to. So that's an interesting place to me where there's something about trauma and pain. And I don't quite even have the words for it, but it's seductive. It kind of brings us in, and there's a part of us that just can't even, it gets a very strong hold on us that sometimes we don't even want to let the light in, even though it could, but for somehow we can't. If I don't quite get that yet, I'm like looking at that. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Where the dark place has just got a grip on us. So I want to hear from you, Niki.
Yeah, thank you.
And as you respond, Niki, I want to invite Jim back into our conversation as we're coming close to the end of the broadcast.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up because it's so valid, right? And it's the same process because it's personal to you. So what's in the micro is in the macro. And so tending to your needs, and I just also wanted to say, this is something, it comes also from a book that I unfortunately don't know where, but it comes from a Tony Robbins seminar that I did a couple of years ago, all of his seminars. And I take my gems for wherever I go. And he was mentioning that also as he travels with his work around the world, that he saw that there's like universal dignity, there's the universal needs. It's the same thing all over the world. And through a book from, I think it is a psychologist, but again, I don't know the book, there's 4 survival needs and there's 2 spiritual needs. And the survival needs are certainty. Uncertainty was equals variety, spontaneity, significance, love, and connection. So if those aren't met, we are in survival. We're not thriving and we're in survival. And then the spiritual ones are growth and contribution. And so we get to look at like what need is met right now, or what is being shooken from me right now. And then we tend to the feeling that the need brings up. And again, many fabulous books. One I really love is Letting Go by David Hawkins. He tells us about the emotional scale and the digging of the archaeological of how we come out on the other side from the so-called negative emotions to the positive ones. And when we do that, then the collective has that moment too. And then you'll be an inspiration, and someone who will feel very similar to you and your feelings right now will say, this is what I'm going through. How did you do it? And it's tending to your own feelings that then will ripple out on the outside. And when you say how, again, a Tony Robbins thing for me is like, don't ask how. That's very like limiting. It's constricting because we want to have an answer with how and why. We want to have an answer. Ask the same question with what. What does it mean to me? What is this so important to me? You know, Ken was speaking to that yesterday too. It's like, what is it that this is so important for you that you have to be this aggressive, you know? And so if I get into the how, I show up in the what, and the how is in the show minus the S, if you write it out. So if I show up for myself, if I tend to myself, if I am gentle with myself, if I put that blanket of compassion around me and say, I am freaking feeling this way right now. And it may seem stupid, or it may seem overwhelming to others, or why this is it. And then through the tending through yourself, you will tend to the whole, which is what I get from you. You so want to do this for all of it, but it starts here. If that makes sense at all. And then the feelings are all universal as well. It's the, you know, there's sadness over in Asia and there's anger over there, and it's all the same. So the dignity, the needs, and the feelings are all universal. So that means we're all one. How we are with it, how we respond to it, how we sit with it, that's the individual process. But it's all the same. So that makes the oneness, and then the individuality, like Ken so amazingly talked about yesterday, those polarities and what's in between. There's no rainbow without black and white. There's no color in between. So we need the black and white in order to get the color. So that's my sense, that start with you, and I'm right next to you, and so is Eileen and all of us here. And I'm so grateful to have been part of this and be part of this group to transmute, not transform. I looked up transmute today. Transmute is change in nature, form, and substance. I like that. Transform is good too, but it's change dramatically, form, appearance, and character. I'm up for transmuting what's happening rather transforming. So
Niki, you remind me of something really important that may also address, Tom, your question. One of the greatest teachers in my life, Peter Rangel, Niki knows him too. He was one of the leaders at the Human Awareness Institute. He used to say this, so challenging. He said, in order to really find this healing at a sort of a humanity level, you have to find the worst within yourself. You have to realize that everything out there is in you, and vice versa. Our world is a reflection of us, and we have it in us. So he would say, can you find the Hitler inside of you? Can you find the Donald Trump inside of you? That would be the challenge of the moment, the part of you that would do what he's doing and feel how you imagine he's feeling and enjoy having, power and wealth and all of these things. Because if we other it, then there's a part of us that becomes part of the shadow. And that's part of us too. They're part of the human circle too. And that's really hard. I think Hitler for me is harder than Trump, but he doesn't exempt even Hitler. So I just want to share that too.
Let me first of all thank you, Niki, and obviously Eileen and Tom as well. Let me, knowing that we're running into some time constraints here and we want to get to the after chat, but I'd like to deepen Tom's query in the following way. And that is to draw from an episode in the life of Jesus of Nazareth that has perplexed people for 2,000 years and won't be resolved today. But I think it offers an anvil upon which we can ponder. And that is when Jesus drove the money changers out from the temple. It's one thing to talk about the oneness of everything and the Hitler within and the Trump within and so forth. And that's very, very true. And as a Jungian, I would say, Eileen, that the opposite is also true. That Hitler is not me. And I have a moral obligation to take action in a concerted way. I mean, one could even refer to Bonhoeffer in the Second World War, who was a Catholic or Protestant theologian. He was in the German Confessing Church. He had a job in the World Council of Churches in New York when the war broke out. And he made the decision to go back to Germany. And if you've read his letters and papers from prison, which he wrote before he was executed by the Nazis, he actually participated in the plot to assassinate Hitler, citing Jesus throwing out the money changers in the temple in Jerusalem a few days before he was offered up to die. So I just wonder how both of you, and Bonhoeffer said, by the way, brilliant point. He says sometimes in dealing with evil, you have to transcend the laws of righteousness and do the right thing. So I just wonder for both of you, Niki and Eileen, how you would respond to if you'd have met Jesus as he threw out the money changers and attacked the Sadducees and the Pharisees as white-coated sepulchres, and you've turned my temple into a den of thieves, or if you'd have been talking with Bonhoeffer, who was participating in the plot to assassinate Hitler as a moral man, what would you say?
I really wouldn't pass judgment if that, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me. I mean, I certainly understand. I don't fully understand, I sort of understand both of them, but I definitely understand the plot to assassinate Hitler and why people would do that. And I mean, I think we all feel sometimes that way, that we just want to eliminate certain people. We want to also eliminate certain parts of ourselves, don't we? Don't we sometimes just feel, there's parts of me that that there are parts of all of us that are so unacceptable that we, in psychological terms, we disown them. And that's what we say, they put them in the shadow. So we could do all of that, but then it's just part of the shadow. That the part of us, that it is the part of us that we aren't able to accept or willing to look at or don't want to. And I understand all of that and share it. But I don't think it really changes the predicament that we're in, which is that we are a human family. And some of our family members are really hard and horrible, and we want to cast them out. We just don't, we really want them to leave and go. And that goes back to, we don't really know what's going on here. There's so many of us who are so incredible and brilliant and have such beautiful hearts and souls. But then there's these other people who just are sort of the opposite, and the tyrants and the psychopaths, as somebody commented in the chat. But maybe but for the grace of God, we would be tyrants and psychopaths. I don't know, I tried to imagine yesterday, what if I were in the position and I just had so much money and could do it. I mean, I could see how people get off on that. It's easier to be kind of, I think it is easier. I think Jesus said this, it's easier to be really pure when you don't have a lot. And Gandhi too. And and you don't have all these trappings that do trap you. They do trap you. And that's the other piece with, like say Trump, is that he's in his own trap, and Musk and all of them, because I just know from my own limited experience that there were earlier times in my life where I believed that, if I have the credential and I have the degree and I have the achievements and I have the money, well, then I'm going to have everything. And guess what? You get there and you get there and you go, wait, this is pretty empty. And that's what set me off on a spiritual path at the age of 27. But because I realized, wait, this is all really hollow. So whatever, they're getting certain things from it, but they're not getting there's a lot of things they aren't getting. And that's the place where I can feel some compassion, I suppose. But this is very challenging, and I don't want to deny that. So those are my thoughts, Jim.
Niki, what would you say? How would you
Well,
start?
I'm with Eileen a little bit. I'm not sure I followed the whole question, but nevertheless, in the conversation, what is coming up for me is there's always that Zen point of surrender, where it is the surrender of throwing the weapons away and saying, like, I surrender, I'm letting go, but not with the creative way, but just the, like, I'm giving up, this is too much. And then there's the surrender to, I'm giving it over because it is too much and I can't handle this by myself. And that goes on a really close tightrope walk. I think that's what you call it, right? At a circus, with control. Am I doing this because I don't feel in control and because I feel controlled or needing to control this? And I think I would sit with that question with either one and say, is this that moment of surrendering because you give it over, or surrendering because you're giving up? Or is it the moment, and also is it the moment where you don't feel in control and something is taking that, or you are wanting to control the situation because there's feelings underneath why you want to do this?
Mhm.
And so that that's what come up. And I don't know if that goes back to what the question really was, but
These
that's,
are imponderables, you know.
yeah,
There's no
yeah.
real answer. There's just different perspectives.
No, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's what I would sit down with both and ask them that, you know, if I would have
Yeah.
a chance to in that moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
Tom, any final reflections, and then why don't you tee us up for tomorrow?
Yeah, I think I'll reserve my reflections because tomorrow we're going to be talking about bursting our bubble and having the humility to accept our self-righteousness. And I think I can probably better answer some of the questions from today after tomorrow's session. So I invite everyone to be back with us again tomorrow as we continue this conversation on forgiveness under duress.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you,
Thank
Niki.
you.
Thank you, Eileen. Wonderful to have you. And Niki, all of our hearts go out to you as you
Mm.
recover from the calamity you've just experienced. All love and blessings. And keep us informed,
Mm.
and we'll endeavor to help as we can.
Thank you
So
very
that'll
much.
bring us to a close for today, everyone. You can join Niki and Eileen and Tom in the after chat. You'll see the link in the chat box that Stan just put in. You received the link in your Zoom reminder for today. And then we'll see you all tomorrow for the 4th of 5 sessions on forgiveness in a time of duress. Great questions to ponder. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
You all.
Thank you. Goodbye.